Hi, my name is Fabian Fröse. In this video I will talk about research design. I will talk about two aspects in this video. First, I will give you an overview of different research designs. I think that's important to get a broad understanding of what research is. And second, then I will give you some ideas how to design a research project. Basically, we can distinguish research designs into 5 different types. First, correlational. Second, experimental. Third, qualitative. Fourth, meta-analysis. And fifth, reviews. I will explain in detail what each of these research design entails. Let us begin by talking about correlational studies. By correlational studies I refer to analysis that is based on field survey data, typically questionnaires, or could also be secondary data sets. What researchers typically do is they receive this data, and that data includes many variables. It could be 50 variables, maybe even more. On the other hand, the researcher has no control of the study variable, cannot manipulate any study variables, all is given. But what we as researchers then usually do, we try to analyze the data and try to test maybe for hypotheses and try to find relationships between those variables in the given data. Very often we would start with correlational analysis to look at relations between two variables, or then maybe also run all kinds of multivariate statistical analysis, such as regressions, group comparisons, or could also be structural equation modeling and so forth. Lots of data, we can analyze the data with various kinds of statistical tests. We can test for relationships between variables, but we cannot establish causality between certain relationships. That's why we call it a correlational study. Next, let us talk about experimental designs. Experimental designs are very common in medicine, medical studies. Think of clinical trials. That might be a new medicine, or maybe a vaccination against some kind of disease. We take it and then we can compare people who received the treatment versus those people who did not receive such kind of treatment. We can distinguish experimental designs into laboratory-based or field-based experiments. In laboratory design, it could be, as the word says, laboratory in a hospital, or it can also be inside a university or research facility, versus a field experiment would take place in a natural setting. It could be in a company, on the street, or wherever it actually happens. Typical characteristics of these experiments are that we have a setting that we can control. We can control the variables, the surroundings. We can try to reduce confounding or disturbing influences. And then it could be that we have one design where we have a group that receives some kind of treatment and compared to another group that receives no treatment. And then we can actually establish causality, because the group that received treatment, it could be training. One group receives training and then becomes much better at some kind of skill comparing to the other. Of course, this needs to be very carefully designed with the treatment before. We compare these groups, and we have the treatment. It could be a training, a drug, or whatever that is, and then we compare it after, and then we can see the difference, or if there's any difference between groups. So the advantage of experimental designs is we can establish causality. Third, talking about qualitative research designs. The different forms of qualitative research. A very common one is interviews. Conducting interviews face-to-face, nowadays also via Skype in different forms, or Zoom. But it's based on spoken words that will be transcribed and that can be analyzed. Or it can also be archival. Maybe we have a book, databases, other things that we would then read and analyze. What is also common in organizational research and also in other areas would be case studies. We look at specific companies, at specific people, and try to analyze, maybe let's say, their development. Another also very common form in qualitative research is observational data. Maybe We watch a video, or we watch commercials, or also very popular would be ethnography. Maybe you would enter a different setting, participate, and then also observe and see what other people and what others are doing, and then try to make sense out of it. Qualitative research is very useful, particularly if you would like to gain a deeper understanding of some issues that we're not so familiar with. And then, if we enter a new field through these different possible forms, we can develop new theories. Qualitative research can also be used to help us understand and interpret certain results. Sometimes we conduct a survey, we find certain findings, and we don't understand them. We don't know why. What we then maybe do is, then we re-enter the field and then conduct interviews with people that were involved and ask them, why did you do this and that? And that would help. Or sometimes also I know many of my doctoral students use that. We conduct small qualitative research, can be archival based, interview based, and we use that only as a preparation for large scale quantitative study. Do you know what a meta-analysis is? If you study psychology, statistics, you probably know. If not, then let me share what that is. So meta-analysis essentially is analysis of other studies. You would pool, you would combine many existing study results. You would combine them based very often on correlation analysis, and then you would reanalyze all these combined data. It could be that you have analyzed 100 studies, and each study analyzed maybe 200 cases or 200 respondents, and then you would meta-analyze maybe 100 or 1 million people. Because of this big data set, this can really help you to establish the true relationship between variables. It can also tell you, maybe in some studies, it is possible there have been 20 studies on a certain drug, whether it is effective or not. And then maybe of these 20 studies, 15 say yes, it is effective, 5 say no, it is not. But if you have this huge meta-analysis, then you can combine and look at it, and then you can say yes, it has a certain effect. But meta-analysis can maybe also help you tell you under what conditions and when it is effective or not. So it can also explain you the boundary conditions or underlying reasons why we have certain relationships. And also meta-analysis are also being used to identify certain gaps in literature or in the previous findings, and then you can look deeper into it. Sometimes also you can also develop theory based on meta-analysis. One advantage of meta-analysis is relatively cheap, because you don't need to conduct a new experiment, not a new survey. You simply analyze existing surveys. At the same time, because you have this huge data set, that may also mean you don't need to conduct another big survey. Now let us talk about reviews. I find reviews extremely helpful. Whenever I enter a new research field, I look for review articles. Review articles also get cited a lot. Also, whenever I have a new doctoral student, I recommend him or her to conduct a review on the topic. Reviews helps a lot in understanding the field. It's also what you would usually see is researchers would synthesize previous research, and also critically evaluate, and then also identify gaps and future research directions. Among the reviews, we can distinguish essentially between two different types. The first one would be a systematic literature review. As the word says, it's very systematic. That means we would probably write in our review which kind of keywords we would type in, which databases we look at, also providing lots of numbers and frequencies and so forth. That is a typical systematic literature review. The other type would be a conceptual work. You would still do a thorough literature review, but numbers, frequencies are not that important. The main objective of this review would be probably to provide a narrative overview of literature, and then, as the word implies, conceptual work, you would develop a conceptual model based on literature review. Up to now, I've introduced you the different research design types. I think that's very informative and provides a good basic. Now let's move on and talk about how to design a research project. How to choose a research design? I think that's a very important question. I think one of the main driving reasons for this should be your research questions or hypothesis. You look at the research question. Is it a research question that's very exploratory in nature? Then you would do some type of qualitative research. Or is it you would like to test hypothesis? Then qualitative research might not be the best option. Maybe rather you would conduct a survey. Second consideration of what research design to employ would be the field of knowledge that exists already on this very topic. Maybe that's also more a scholarly perspective. Yeah, but we would probably begin our research with a thorough literature review. Then we would understand how much research already exists on the topic. What kind of methods have been employed? And based on that, we identify gaps, and then we would start our research question. If it's a topic that has been covered a lot, then maybe the exploratory types of research designs are not so meaningful. Maybe it's something else you want to do. Or maybe there's a lack of causality in a certain topic, then maybe you would run an experiment. Third, what is also very important is, what is your purpose? From a researcher and purpose, you would like to publish in a top-tier journal, then it would be very important to look what the existing research exists, what kinds of gaps exist there, modify research question accordingly, maybe also employ a very fancy latest research design or something that has not been used so far, and that would make perfect sense. But it could also be your contract researchers. You get a job, please test this and that. And then of course you will do it accordingly. And then also if it's a test of something, maybe a marketing project, how effective it is commercial, then you could do qualitative focus group interviews, or maybe also a larger survey and so forth. So the purpose is important. And fourth, I think that's also very important. It is very important to be realistic. What are your resources? What is your expertise? If you're excellent at qualitative research, then probably you would favor this type of research methods. Or you're very good at statistics, you would like to utilize it. Then it makes sense, and of course I can understand that. If you're supposed to conduct a new survey, then the question is also what resources are available. We always want to conduct a representative, multi-wave, longitudinal, multi-source, blah blah and so forth survey, but maybe we don't have enough resources. Then giving limited resources, I think we try to employ research design that would be most adequate and optimal given these limitations. Research process. Here on the right hand side, you can see an overview of a research process. I would like to emphasize the fact process. I think you can see it goes top down, starting to lower, but equally we could display it as a circle. It's also difficult to pinpoint where's the starting point. Here in this figure you see the phenomenon first. You observe something and then the rest follows. It could be you notice women earn less money than men. And then you would develop a research question. Why? And then you would try to identify appropriate theory. And then you would conceptualize the research question, identify specific variables, and try also to explain relationships between certain variables. And then you would collect and analyze data and answer a research question. That's the process. As I mentioned, also the starting point can be different. It could also be you have certain theory at hand, you have gaps in the theory or certain questions, and then you would start with that. And based on that, you have some conceptualization and propose your research question. And then it continues. And as I mentioned, it's a process, so it can also be iterative, meaning at the same time and influencing each other. It also depends on your research design. Qualitative research has it very often that is moving between theory, findings back and forth, and then maybe modify everything. Whereas, let's say in quantitative research, it's more a linear process, as you can see here on the right-hand side. Now let us dig a little deeper into what each of these steps means. What is a phenomenon? Basically, a phenomenon is almost anything that you can sense, that you can perceive. You can, with your eyes, with your ears, with your nose, with your mouth, or with your hands. Of course, in a business setting, we would think maybe of some business-related aspects. It could also be a stock exchange crash. It could be a pay increase. Many possible options. What is a research question? Essentially, a research question is based on a problem or phenomenon that we have observed. And you ask a question. And as silly as it sounds, you ask a question such as what is, why, how, and so forth, ending with a question mark. And then, of course, you would like to try to find an answer to that. I gave you this example before. We know in most countries women earn less money than men. A research question could be, why do women earn less money? And then you can study it. Identification of theory. You have your research question. But to answer the research question, we would like to utilize a theory. Why is that even important? The idea is behind a theory, or maybe also a more broad term, it's an idea or broad understanding or a concept of why something happens. And that can help us explain it. And that's why we like to refer to theory. To give you an example, job search. You're looking for a job. I'm looking for a job. Why do I find or do not find a job? There are different theories that can explain, such as human capital, because education is important, or it could also be personal organization fit. I get this job at this company, I don't get it because we don't match. And that's important then to utilize these theories, trying to understand and reason why this happens. And that can also inform us for the future. Alright, let's assume you have a research question and a theory. In the next step, you would like to combine that. And to be more specific, you would like to develop a conceptual model, such as the one as you can see here. You see the circles, and then the arrows and numbers, H1, H2, H3. H1 stands for hypothesis 1, H2 hypothesis 2, hypothesis that you would like to test. Let's take the example from before. Job search and human capital theory. The research question could be, how can I land a good job? Then, now we put this into our conceptual model. Hypothesis 1 might be, students who study hard can get a good job. Hypothesis 2 would be, perhaps, students who study hard can get into a well-known university. H2. And then H3 would be, students from well-known universities will find good jobs. And that would be then our conceptual model related to job search and human capital. But the basic idea is we have the research question theory, and then we try to make it more specific and turn it into a conceptual model. Once you have your conceptual model, it's time to think about survey design. We have another video for that, and data collection. It is very important to very carefully think about your sample, a suitable sample to test your model. The previous example, if it's about students, probably you would test it on university students. Then you would also think very carefully about the methods. What kind of methods would you like to employ? What kind of research design? And then, of course, in the next step, you would also very specifically think about data collection. How do you collect your data? Would you conduct an online survey? Would you do face-to-face interviews? And so forth. Once you've collected the data, the fun part starts. You can analyze the data. Of course, you have to clean it first, but then you can analyze it. There are different ways. We've talked about different research designs. For qualitative research, which is often based on interview data, group discussions, or observations, You could also say very often on text. Yeah, you would very often do some form of content analysis. These days, even though it's qualitative research, very often it means computer-aided analysis, meaning also use software and analyze text data, for instance, not necessarily. Then for quantitative analysis, you have surveys, experiments, or secondary data, which would be very common. You would also use computer programs, such as R, Stata, SPSS, you name it. And then you would conduct all kinds of statistical analysis, very often multivariate analysis. There could be regression analysis, for example. You have completed the data analysis. You have confirmed or disconfirmed your hypothesis. I think that's great. Yeah, but then of course the next question is, so what? Yeah, you would need to interpret the results. That is very important. You would probably then go back to your theory, whether confirmed or not, or how you extend that theory. And then of course what is very important for any kind of research project is, what are the implications? Yeah, what are the implications for theory, for research? How did you extend theory? How did you confirm theory? Or what is the next future research direction? And then also we have practical or managerial implications. What are the implications for management, for companies, for policymakers and so forth? And that is also important. Of course it depends who's your target audience. If it's an academic journal, theory is important. If it's a consulting project, then theory is not so important. It's about the managerial implications. Great, now we're coming to the end of this video. Let me try to conclude. I think I would like to make 2 points. I think the first one is, we have different research designs. And I would stress there's no better or worse, it always depends. That leads to my second point. You would like to very carefully select the appropriate research design. That should be guided by your research question, feasibility and so forth. And then you can implement your research project. Good luck and bye-bye.